October 2, 2025. China's Navy, a multi-trillion-dollar force built to dominate the Pacific, has just walked into a deadly trap. And the most surprising part? It's not at sea, but hidden across Australia's deserts and forests. In a deal that shook the global balance, the United States sold Australia HIMARS launchers, capable of firing missiles that reach hundreds of kilometers. Suddenly, the Pacific has turned into an invisible, impenetrable wall. Beijing, Moscow, and Pyongyang are now on high alert, and the hunt for China's Navy has just begun. While Beijing was trying to figure out how an invisible wall had suddenly appeared in the Pacific, the answer was hidden inside a contract signed behind closed doors between Washington and Canberra. On paper, it looked like just another defense deal. The United States approved the sale of 48 additional M142 HIMARS systems to Australia, a $705 million agreement, but in practice, it completely shifted the military balance in the region. With this new batch, Australia now operates nearly 90 HIMARS launchers, a number that places it among the largest mobile rocket forces on the planet. For comparison, that's more than the combined total of several NATO European armies. The HIMARS, or High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, is far more than an armed truck. It's a modular platform capable of launching guided missiles up to 500 kilometers away, striking targets with surgical precision. And when equipped with the ATACMS, or the new PRSM, that range can surpass 700 kilometers, covering virtually the entire northern coast of Australia, and with it, any Chinese ship daring to cross the Timor Sea or the South China Sea. Until recently, Australia was an essentially defensive force, trained to protect its borders and bases, but now it has become a lethal and unpredictable predator, capable of striking before being struck. It's the classic David versus Goliath scenario. A smaller ally, armed with the most advanced technology on the planet, ready to challenge the giant that rules the Pacific. And the most intriguing part is that this shift wasn't just military, it was geopolitical. Because by selling these systems, the United States didn't just arm an ally, it repositioned the very center of power in the Pacific. But to understand the true impact of this, we need to look at where those launchers were placed and why the Australian desert might become the most strategic battlefield of the century. The change is not just numerical, it is conceptual. Turning land-based launchers into ship killers rewrites the logic of naval warfare. And the protagonist of this revolution is the HIMARS. When fitted with the right missiles, it stops being an artillery system and becomes a ship killer. First point, what is coming next? The precision strike missile, known as PRSM, is being developed to operate from platforms like the M142 HIMARS and promises, in future versions, the ability to engage moving maritime targets thanks to a multi-mode seeker and incremental modes designed for the anti-ship role. That means a truck parked in the Australian interior could, in theory, engage a naval target hundreds of kilometers away. Second point, the economic advantage. A modern Chinese destroyer of the Type 055 class costs in the hundreds of millions up to nearly $1 billion. A carrier costs several billion. By contrast, a missile launched from a HIMARS, especially the successors to ATACMS and future increments of the PRSM, costs only a fraction of that, a few $100,000 to a few $1 million per shot depending on the variant. In pure cost terms, each expensive ship becomes a target whose destruction fits into a comparatively tiny budget, forcing the opponent to rethink dispersal and the risk of keeping large platforms in theater. Third point, mobility as a weapon. HIMARS is not a fixed fortress. It is a truck-mounted system designed to shoot and vanish. In operational practice, it fires, displaces 20 to 50 kilometers, reappears on another route, and repeats. Put that into vast deserts, forests, or Pacific islands, and you get a network of launchers that are hard to find in advance and dangerous to accurately punish. That mobility multiplies launcher survivability and complicates the enemy's reaction chain. The combined effect is the classic formula of asymmetric warfare: low cost per effect plus high potential lethality plus dispersion and mobility equals a sustainable strategy. Simply put, sink a $900 million ship with a missile that costs a fraction of that, and the strategic math no longer works for the fleet builder. Finally, there are technical and operational limits. Detecting moving targets at sea, defeating countermeasures, and integrating intelligence and real-time targeting remain challenges. But exercises and tests already show that the HIMARS paired with PRSM and long-range anti-ship solutions turns Australian geography into a lethal hunting ground for ships. This is the real asymmetric revolution. The land has begun to hunt the sea. The idea is simple and fierce. Stack long-range power until the Pacific becomes a cage. Picture an invisible wall, not of concrete, but of danger zones and reach. And Australia has become the southern anchor of that structure, starting with the Southern Bastion. With about 90 HIMARS launchers spread across the north and the interior, Australia functions as the backbone of this wall. Positioned in remote areas, deserts, coastal fringes and smaller islands, those launchers create a lethal arc that covers critical sea lanes and extends the threat envelope far beyond Australia's territorial waters. The massive presence of mobile systems here means any attempt by China's navy to operate freely in the Timor Sea or off Australia's northern coast faces constant risk. The next element is the death zones, the corridors that connect China to the world. The Malacca, Sunda and Lombok Straits and the South China Sea are vital arteries of Chinese trade. Put long-range launchers on islands and coasts near those points, and what were once commercial routes become potential traps. Warships, logistical convoys, and even ports that support supply chains fall inside envelopes that can be struck with precision. Practically speaking, a coherent blockade does not need to sink every ship. It only needs to make passage so risky that traffic diverts, costs rise, and critical routes stall. But the wall is not built from a single type of brick. The United States and other allies add layers. Japan supplying longer-range missiles and platforms such as the Type 12 and the ability to employ Tomahawks. The Philippines offering staging points and logistics to project force closer to Southeast Asian routes, and Taiwan strengthening its coastal and anti-ship defenses, a porcupine meant to make any maritime advance costly and risky. Together, these elements form an integrated network. Sensors, intelligence, communications, and long-range weapons operating in concert along the first island chain. The effect is geopolitical, not merely military. Where China once sailed with relative freedom, there is now a combination of reach, deterrence, and operating cost that reshapes strategic choices. Diverted routes, more widely dispersed naval groups, and a greater need for escorts and expensive countermeasures. In short, the wall does not have to be absolutely impenetrable. It only needs to raise the price and complexity of entry to levels that change the naval behavior of the power that once dominated the Pacific. Beneath the missile wall lies an even more secret layer, and perhaps the most decisive one, the AUKUS Pact. Essentially, AUKUS is the trilateral alliance between Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, whose main goals include delivering nuclear-powered attack submarines to Australia and integrating advanced naval capabilities among the three countries. The first pillar of this layer is simple: give Australia underwater projection autonomy. The plan foresees Canberra receiving Virginia-class submarines on a bridging basis and then collaborating with the United Kingdom to build a new class under the SSN AUKUS program, which will be operated and built with shared technology. Recent formal agreements have consolidated this long-term cooperation. Why does this change everything? Because a nuclear submarine is not just another boat, it is a ghost hunter. Unlike conventional diesel or AIP submarines, an SSN can remain submerged for weeks or months, sustain high underwater speeds without surfacing, and operate with virtually unlimited range, turning endurance and reach into near-limitless attributes. That gives the Allies the ability to patrol sea lanes, ambush convoys, and monitor ports and battle groups with an almost invisible presence. The nightmare for Beijing is straightforward. Imagine quiet SSN patrols from Australian, British, and American boats spread across the Indo-Pacific, capable of tracking acoustic signatures, intercepting communications, and, when necessary, launching torpedoes or anti-ship missiles against the most valuable vessels, all without public warning. A single well-placed torpedo can send a destroyer or an oil tanker to the bottom. The practical effect is that prized naval formations become vulnerable even when operating in waters they believed were safe. There are, however, practical limits that shape the timeline and scale of this threat. Producing enough SSNs requires heavy industrial expansion. The United States and the United Kingdom must increase shipbuilding cadence to meet commitments to Australia. Recent reports show debates and administrative reviews over schedules and construction capacity, which could delay deliveries and affect how quickly this undersea layer becomes fully operational. Even so, the reality is clear: combining a vast network of land-based HIMARS launchers with SSN patrols beneath the surface creates a two-tier threat visible and invisible, that forces any adversary to spend enormous resources on countermeasures, escorts, and intelligence. Strategically, AUKUS adds the deepest layer of the wall, the ability to hunt the sea from the land and from the silence of the depths. The response came quickly and predictably. China, Russia, and North Korea reacted like a nervous bloc, accelerating ballistic missile programs, conducting joint naval exercises, and multiplying their shows of force. But beneath the surface, those moves reveal the opposite of what they seem. They are signs of vulnerability. Because none of these actions solve the central problem. There is no effective defense against the mobility of a HIMARS hidden in the Australian desert, ready to change position in minutes. And there is no sensor capable of consistently detecting the presence of nuclear submarines silently patrolling beneath thousands of kilometers of ocean. While the axis of evil reacts, the United States and its allies are already playing on another board, one where the side that dominates is the one setting the pace, not the one responding. The sale of HIMARS to Australia was only the most visible piece of a much larger strategic puzzle. Behind it lies a coordinated network of sensors, missiles, submarines, and allies that has created something entirely new. A three-dimensional prison around China, in the air, on land, and at sea. And the final message is brutal in its simplicity. The era of Chinese expansion in the Pacific is over. Now the game is played under new rules, and the ones who wrote those rules, once again, speak English. While China struggles to understand how it became trapped inside its own wall, another empire is starting to crack, Vladimir Putin's. Because while the United States builds invisible barriers across the Pacific, NATO is raising real walls in Europe, and one of them is about to crumble. In the next video, you'll see how Kaliningrad, Russia's bastion between Poland and Lithuania, is turning into the Kremlin's Achilles heel. A territory that once symbolized nuclear power is now on the verge of becoming the greatest vulnerability of modern Russia. Click the video appearing on your screen and find out why the siege against Putin has already begun.